Greetings, humans of the internet. Welcome once again to Bowtie Talks. I, of course, am your excellent host, Luke Johnson, coming to you from my undisclosed location, Midwest USA. Coming to you once again with some more historical insights about this week's topic, the toy industry. That's right, I'll be going over the history of some early American toy companies, the history of some famous American toys, and even some not American toys that do have connections to America. Because I can. It's my podcast, and what I say goes. And now, on with the history. Now, in the early days of this country, back when it was still under British rule, the early colonists did bring some toys with them. They were also surprised to find that some of the natives' toys were similar to their dolls. And interestingly, the earliest surviving colonial toy is a doll that was purchased by William Penn, the man who founded Pennsylvania. And like most early American toys, it is wooden, and that's appropriate because, for those of you who don't know, Pennsylvania literally means Penn's Forest, or Penn's Woodland. And as early as 1767, alphabet blocks were being advertised as educational toys. And it was also during the 1700s we saw the rise of the American craftsman. During the 1700s, in a Pennsylvania newspaper called Pennsylvania Gazette, a man named Plunkett Fleeson advertised that he made drums, toy drums, and drum coverings from spare wood, empty nail barrels, batted skins, and cords. However, for the first American toy company, that is a consolidated group, we look not to Pennsylvania, but Massachusetts. Sometime during the late 1700s, perhaps the early 1800s, I'm not really sure of a date, a group of craftsmen led by a man named William S. Tower in the town of South Hingham, Massachusetts, created the Tower Guild to produce a wider variety of toys. And because of his involvement in the group, William S. Tower is often called the father of the American toy industry. The guild was later renamed the Tower Toy Company. However, the first company to make toys on a larger scale did not come until 1838. It was there in Philadelphia the first manufacturing plant dedicated solely to making toys was incorporated. The company was Francis Fields and Francis, and unlike most early toy manufacturers, they used metal instead of wood. A decrease of forests in Germany led some toy makers in the United States to turn to metalwork, and that's exactly what Francis Field and Francis did. Like many early toy companies, they did not originally start off making toys. They started off importing or creating many tin goods, including toys, and would then sell them. They later stuck to toys, however, and they created what is believed to be the first toy sold on the mass market in the United States. A tin model of a horse-drawn fire engine. They also made small models of locomotives and small models of horses. And by 1869, cast iron toys were appearing. By 1869, the J&D Stevens Company in Connecticut manufactured its first mechanical bank. Mechanical banks became increasingly popular with children during the Industrial Revolution because the middle class was beginning to rise. And children became interested in saving money when they saw the strange mechanical banks. And the J&D Stevens Company, much like Francis Fields and Francis, began manufacturing other items besides toys. They originally started off manufacturing primarily hardware and a few toys, but then moved over to toys. However, we did not see very many big-name toy companies until about the 1910s. And during 1919, one of the very first very big-name toy companies began. After several years of working for the F.J. Strauss Company in New York City, a young man named Louis Marks had an idea to manufacture toys. Enlisting the help of his brother David, he did exactly that. And that's exactly what they did. You could say it was the mark of the men, or the marks of the men, rather. The company was known for its excellent quality toys, and two policies were instilled even during the earliest days of the company. Give the customer more for less money, and quality is not negotiable. Two qualities which I think are definitely a mark of their work. The company made everything from toy guns to model trains, both electric and wind-up. And interestingly, the company even thrived during the Great Depression. The company set up multiple manufacturing plants. The first major one was in Pennsylvania. And also around this time, not in America, but Denmark, a new toy company name was being formed. One that would go on to arguably become one of the most famous in history. And while it might not be an American story, I will tell it because I happen to admire the spirit of its founder and because it was one of my favorite toys as a child. I'm talking about the Lego Company. In Denmark in 1916, a carpenter named Ole Christensen purchased a carpentry shop where he built primarily furniture and home goods. However, tragedy struck in 1924 when one of his sons accidentally set fire to the carpentry shop, which destroyed all of his inventory. Tragedy would strike again 5 years later when the Great Depression hit, and during this time a great personal tragedy would come to the Christensen family when Ole Christensen's wife died in 1932. To keep his company afloat, Christensen had to fire half of his employees. And to keep the company afloat, Christensen began carving cheap wooden toys and eventually landed on a wheeled duck that became their company's first popular toy. However, the money generated from the toys that the company made was not enough to keep it from going under, and Christensen's brother had to bail him out to keep the company from going bankrupt. But just as the old saying goes, you can't keep a good man down, and Ole Christensen was definitely not kept down. And in 1935, he changed the company's name which he derived from two Danish words meaning play well, leg and goat, which he combined to make Lego. Christensen would not find out till later, however, that Lego in Latin means I put together. Tragedy would strike again, however, when in 1942 his carpentry shop burnt down a second time. And it was also around this time that a new material was being introduced into the toy making market, plastic. The injection molding process was being introduced to the toy market. However, it was very expensive, but that did not discourage Ole Christensen. One of the first plastic toys the company manufactured was a model of a Ferguson tractor that could be purchased either already put together or a buildable model that could be taken apart and then snapped back together, a feature that would later become famous in Lego bricks. The company would later make the bricks that bear its name in 1955 when Ole Christensen was issued a patent for a new design of building blocks that snapped together and then could be pulled apart and then snapped back together again. True story of ingenuity and not letting yourself be discouraged. Definitely shows how something that is torn down can definitely be built back up again. If I had a Rimshot app, I'd probably insert it there. This also brings us back to the good old US of A, where I will now talk about some of the biggest names in toy manufacturing and some of their products. In 1923, three Polish immigrant brothers named Henry Heilel and Hermann Hassenfeld began manufacturing pencil boxes. During the Great Depression, to combat their pencil supplier, to cut costs, Hasbro, which is short for Hassenfeld Brothers, get it, began manufacturing pencils themselves. Toys would not be manufactured until the 1940s. Then Hasbro began manufacturing doctor's kits and modeling clay. As this was also during World War II, they also issued junior air warden kits complete with a small flashlight and mini gas mask. The company's popularity later exploded when they bought the rights to a new patent, plastic eyes, shoes, noses, and hats that could be poked into vegetables or fruits that could be used to make figures. Mr. Potato Head. That's right, to play with Mr. Potato Head originally, children had to insert eyes, noses, feet, and other plastic parts into actual vegetables. Plastic body did not come with the set until the 1960s. And Mr. Potato Head was also the first toy ever advertised on television. The 1940s also saw the rise of another toy company, Mattel, founded by three people, Elliot Handler, his wife Ruth, and Elliot's friend Harold Matson Elliot. Mattel. Get it? Mattel, Matson Elliot. Okay, now that we've got that covered. Back to history. The company began manufacturing picture frames and dollhouse furniture. Matson would sell his share of the company to the Handlers because of ill health. Mattel would drop its dollhouse furniture line because of stiff competition from better equipped companies. The company's first major success came in 1947 with a small plastic ukulele, which was then followed by a plastic piano. The company's next success came from a music box with a patented play system, which taught the Handlers a valuable lesson. Make toys that keep children engaged so they'll want to play for long periods of time. And in 1955, Mattel made another huge step by sponsoring a 15-minute piece of the Mickey Mouse Club on ABC. However, this would not compare to the next meteoric rise that would take place in 1959. During that year, Ruth Handler designed a toy that would later become extremely famous. Most dolls at this time were designed to look like young girls. There had never really been a children's doll that was made to look like a fully grown woman. Ruth Handler decided to change that when in 1959 she came up with the Barbie doll. The doll was first met with little fanfare at the 1959 Toy Fair in New York City, but that would change in the years to come. Also, a little side note, the doll was actually named after Ruth Handler's daughter, Barbara, who, when she grew up, actually ended up hating the connection, and she always denied it. And in fact, Barbara's own daughter did not own a Barbie doll, ever. And I hope you've enjoyed this little walk through another facet of American history as much as I enjoyed telling you about it. Thank you for listening to Bowtie Talks. Once again, I'm Luke Johnson. Thank you, goodbye, and God bless.